Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another video. I don't have a name for this one because there wasn't a community feedback just released, but I wanted to talk to you about moving forward as the Intel Extreme Masters in Katowice has just concluded. Big congratulations to TUI for taking it home 4-3 in one of the best StarCraft 2 tournaments and finals I would say that we've seen in a very long time. I come here to talk about something not really balance related, and I find that it's very difficult to distinguish oftentimes for players of StarCraft the difference between changes that maybe you would want made to the game for fun or design or diversity versus changes that are, how should I put this, balance, focused on win rates and whatnot. I personally believe that one of the biggest weaknesses of StarCraft 2 as a game is that, unlike many other games, you rarely see any patches to try and solve pain points of the game. Pain points mean things that are very frustrating for a lot of users and are created out of some weird niche that kind of works and everyone deals with it, but at the end of the day is flawed to a weird degree where, and obviously, like I just said, the biggest problem with StarCraft is that the focus on a lot of the changes that the design team, that the development team seems to look at for multiplayer are a bit more focused on trying to force 50% win rates in tournament results. The first thing I'd like to immediately do is say that this is not possible, and getting close to these numbers is okay, but most of the time, if a player is a lot better than another guy, then he'll be dominant for a while, and he'll make those numbers look bad anyway. Also, StarCraft is actually really well balanced at the moment, despite a few things that are a bit glaring. And I think that it's possible to work on some of the pain points of StarCraft 2 without destroying the so-called balance, which we seem to cherish so much for this game. So there are a couple things that I would like to talk about, and I think that now that Katowice is over, this is a perfect opportunity to put into the test map as soon as possible some changes that I believe would help deal with some of the pain points. And I would like to say, for a couple of these changes, thank you random people on Reddit, Team Liquid, Twitter. I don't remember all of your names, but I will say that I did not come up with all of these ideas myself because, like many of you, I like to be a part of the community and read other people's feedback, other people's ideas, and I don't consider myself to be the expert of all things. I do not have the answers to all problems, but some very clever people did, and I'd like to talk about those things right now. So, first and foremost, I think it's very obvious. We've been talking a lot about Terran versus Protoss over the last month or two, and no big surprise here. Every time people like to start complaining and getting stuff crazy going on, we all want to jump the gun and try to get something nerfed or whatever. Now, I personally think that the Widow Mine is too strong. I don't like the interaction that it has with probes. I don't like the interaction that it has with early game Protoss aggression. And I think that it is the equivalent of the Immortal in Heart of the Swarm and Wings of Liberty, as far as you don't build roaches or siege tanks because this unit exists. For similar reasons, you don't build Zealots with Charge. You don't do Zealot Archon or Zealot Archon Templar because Widow Mines, as they are, exist in the game as so strong of a counter that they can deal with it. So the first thing I'd like to address is the Widow Mine. And outside of making splash shield tweaks, I think it's a bit ridiculous that the unit can one-shot with AoE insane amounts of forces. I know these are exciting things to see in esports sometimes, but in my opinion, they are not the focal points of many games unless they end them instantly. And stuff like this, being able to instantly wipe out an entire worker line, in my opinion, is an extremely frustrating game mechanic to have to deal with, especially if you're not a top player, because many people still do these builds. And this kind of goes back to a bigger topic that I won't fit into this video, which is the frustration of playing this game and not being a pro. But I think that the Widow Mine is an area, and I'm glad that they're already looking at this for the next patch. I'm going to mention a couple of other things that are going to make this make sense, but I would like them to remove some of the direct unit shield damage as well. And I know this is going to sound weird because I recently said, when they first said that they wanted to do that it was a bad idea. But there are ways to balance out, and no pun intended or whatever with the actual balance numbers. But I think if you can, removing some or a lot of the shield splash damage, obviously the probe thing is there's not really anything you can do about it unless you make the splash 39, which would just be weird because then it wouldn't. Yeah, it wouldn't have. Yeah, that'd be really weird. So I would like to see further tweaks looked at in terms of the Widowmine, mostly because, you know, like we're at a place right now where you can build siege tanks and you can get immortals, and immortals are good against the tanks if they can get up close to them. But it's not like you can't micro your tanks to focus fire them and spread the splash out across the barriers that are activated and the ones that are disactivated and get a lot of work done. So I would personally like to see some further tweaks to the Widowmine to make it less of a punishing unit, and then if the unit isn't able to get enough value, then some other tweak to make it easier to get out, or, you know, something that can justify it not wiping out entire Protoss armies, for example. As I know that the unit right now is very key against Zerg, it's possible that a lot of people would disagree with this because they feel that the matchup isn't playable without a lot of Widowmines, and that's a completely justified point too. The next thing I want to talk about in that regard is units like the Cyclone. I think it's pretty obvious that the biggest issue with the Cyclone right now is that it has a ridiculous amount of damage output on the ground. This is the first time that Terran has had a mech unit outside of the Heart of the Swarm beta that can bully a greedy player. You know, it's oftentimes said that the best way to beat a mech player when you scout it or something like that is to just try to play greedy, take a lot of bases. The Cyclone's the first unit that really disrupts that, and I think that's good. I think it's cool that it's a unit that can move out on the map, but it's been one of the things that I've seen brought up, and I know for some reason pro gamers don't like to bring stuff up, so I will say it for them. When I first talked about the Liberator, when I got the Liberator nerfed, there were people that were like, it's the Cyclone, these early Cyclone pressures. So there's certainly something to be said for the Cyclone's strength in terms of being able to be reactored out versus some of its glaring weaknesses. And I think this is something that could be really easily addressed. Personally, if I had to look at a way to, you know, kind of round out the Cyclone as a unit, it is a very cool unit. It is very interesting. I would like to see a world where the Cyclone maybe, instead of doing its current damage, which is
show me who you want to die.
160 damage over 14 seconds to air, I'd rather see it 160 over 7 seconds. Reduce the amount of time it takes to do its damage, or increase the damage that the anti-air does. I only say reduce it in half because then you don't, you know, Cyclones aren't insta-giving stuff. But I think of this and a removal of the reactor for the Cyclone, because it is a beefy unit. The Cyclone has more hit points than a siege tank. Some people don't know this. It's got double the hit points of a Widowmine. It has double the hit points of a Hellion. The Cyclone is a beefy unit that can bully greedy players, and I think that the spammability of them early on makes them frustrating in certain cases, but having the ability to move out on the map versus, you know, Stargate especially, but also, you know, units that Cyclones can't really run from right now, is a big deal. If you take away the Cyclone's damage or its range in any capacity, you can't really move out with it. You can't really do a whole lot with it. But the Cyclone is also great because it's a terrible siege unit. If you leave Cyclones outside of somebody's base, you're not going to get a cost-effective trade if 10 Stalkers blink onto your 2 Cyclones, like you might with like a couple siege tanks with focus fire, for example. Not that you would leave 2 tanks by themselves. But anyway, I digress. I think that shifting the Widowmine's damage away against Protoss a bit will greatly help bring back some of the less punishing scenarios that occur, like losing your Oracle instantly or losing your Zealots instantly, the splash damage killing your High Templar, although of course the splash shield nerf is something that is coming in, and instead trading out that early reliance that Terran has. You know, many Terran players just kind of hope that their Widowmine hits an Oracle, as that's the best way to get rid of them, is to just hope they fly into it. I think it'd be better if you could open something a little more stable like a Cyclone, since especially in Legacy of the Void, they are also one of the best. Even the old Cyclone was one of the best ways to deal with things like pylon rushes, and that you know, stuff like that has its own video. And there's a few other things that I want to talk about. So that's just the first thing, is the interaction that Terran has with the Widowmine being extremely powerful versus the Cyclone being almost perfect, but a bit too much in some areas and not quite enough in some others. So I wouldn't want to see a crazy, you know, I guess the TLDR of this would be nerf the Widowmine damage versus shields, make it less punishing for Protoss players, and at the same time give Terran something a little bit more stable for that home defense. You know, the Cyclone is our mothership core. It's the closest thing that we have to a queen. It does a lot of damage against ground stuff. It has a lot of health, and it can push away air units. You know, that's the closest thing we got to an 8-range queen with transfuse, right? So next thing I wanted to talk about, and just to show you guys some of the things that I'm talking about, I didn't really have a video or gameplay footage to show you of the Cyclone interaction, but an obvious issue right now with StarCraft 2, and I'm going to turn the sound off so it's not just super loud, but one of the biggest issues I have with StarCraft 2 right now is the Raven has become a unit that is extremely polarizing in the Terran versus Terran matchup, not only, but has an insane amount of push power. And maybe this is okay. Maybe this is the way that it's meant to be. But I think the best solution to the Raven is to bring it back to what it was pre-patch 3.8, at least as far as auto turrets go. Secret Missile is very interesting with the extra range. It's very weird because it can still be dodged, technically. You still have advanced time to dodge it. So I won't go into the whole Secret Missile thing. I'm not someone who spams Ravens if you watch my stream. I don't really like this unit, mostly because the auto turrets are insane. If I could suggest a tweak to this unit, it would be something along the lines of the auto turret maybe going back to, what was it before? It was like 16 damage, I think. Auto turret is like 16 damage, and the upgrade put it at 24. I think that's really the only way that this unit should be used in StarCraft 2. Right now, the auto turret does 24 damage per shot. It 2-shots workers. It 2-shots marines. In TVT, it's extremely punishing because your early game anti-air is limited to marines, which get absolutely wrecked by these. Vikings are also very low hit point units. Relatively speaking, they have less health than the Raven as well. And they do die extremely, extremely quickly to these turrets as well. The strength of the auto turret in general, I think, is a problem, and that's why I'm bringing it up. I don't have any specific things to say other than patch 3.8 introduced a cool mechanic with Secret Missile. That's awesome. Auto turrets are a bit extreme, in my opinion. And I would like to see them scaled down in some other way, at least. Maybe a reduction on the hit points so that if you have an army there, you can actually kill them. For those of you that don't know, auto turrets have 150 hit points. So when a Raven, or in many TVT's case, 2 Ravens, come in and drop 5 auto turrets, you can do the math. 5 auto turrets, 150 health each. Does your army actually have enough damage output to kill half an indestructible rock before it wipes out your army? So I think that analogy completely covered that one. Things that I do like, obviously one of the big things I really like is the Viking got a lot of utility on the ground with the anti-mechanical damage that it was given in patch 3.8. I think stuff like this is a really good direction to go in. It keeps the utility up. The Viking is a slow, fragile unit with a lot of range in the air. I've said before that I think some of the health should be moved from the Liberator to the Viking. I still don't really like the Viking in terms of its fragility, but the reward, the risk reward for the damage you can do. These bad boys can snipe add-ons in TVT if your opponent's overly aggressive. We don't really see it used against Protoss because the time to land is the same time for an overcharge to kill it. So these are the types of changes that I like. Making these things a little bit more viable in other ways that we maybe haven't expected. And you're going to see some of the other units that I'm looking at. The Liberator change was definitely one of the biggest ones, and I was very happy to help push this one through. The damage being changed. And when I talk about pain points, things that are frustrating, things that are not fun to play against, things that are difficult to deal with in general, this is one of the best changes made to the game. The Liberator is not going to 2-shot your Stalkers. It's much less punishing. They can still kill a lot of your workers if they focus fire them, but it's a lot less punishing to deal with this sort of stuff. So the direction of these things should be that they can be dealt with. The auto turrets, if you want to invest in an upgrade that makes it a little bit less punishing to have to deal with in the early game, that's also great. And at the same time, I think, you don't want, these things have other ways that they can be adjusted. Like I said, either the range of the auto turret, which is currently 6 by default, it outranges Marines. It has the same range as Marines in a bunker. Obviously, it has 1 less range than unsieged tanks. But the point is, they are extremely good all around. And this comes back to another thing. As I was gonna say, the auto turret is also amazing at defending against, as you may have heard, doom drops. Keeping a couple Ravens at home rather than using them aggressively is one of the best ways to deal with an opponent coming with a bunch of medivacs. I didn't know a good way to show this in the unit tester, but one of the best suggestions that I've heard as far as the siege tank goes is to just make it 8 cargo And I actually really, really like this. It pretty much only affects TVT. Doom drops don't work that well against Zerg because Zerg usually has a lot of vision. A good Zerg player will have vision. A good Zerg player will always know where your army is because they'll either have overlords spread out, and if they kill their overlords, they'll spread them out again. That vision is worth it. Or they'll have creep spread, etc., etc. Or even if the Terran is beating the crap out of you, you'll see them because they're beating the crap out of you. So you don't see the Doom drop play as much. There are big drops, but they're usually that comes down to a different discussion about medivac boosts and all that jazz. But for the most part, it's not perceived as a problem. And obviously versus Protoss, you almost never see those drops, sometimes in big ways, but those are usually problematic because Liberators back them up, not because there are 6 siege tanks inside of your base. The obvious caveat to this is that Terran units move a lot slower than Zerglings, so if you're trying to come in and catch a Doom drop or something like that, more often than not, the siege tank's going to kill everything that you have before they get in. So one of the suggestions given was to make the siege tank a unit that fills up a medivac completely. This way, if you want to do a Doom drop, you would need 1 medivac per siege tank. There are almost no scenario I can think of where players are keeping lots of siege tanks inside of medivacs, outside of that one game where it was either Gumiho or 4GG or Bomber or something. I don't know. It's like Heart of the Swarm, and they drop tanks on like Altaziem's Stronghold to snipe bases. But we have Cyclones for that now, and Hellbats and Liberators. So I think that would be a really big change. So TLDR so far, I'd like to see damage against shields scaled back on Widow Mines for both the splash and the single target. I'd like to see the Cyclone's DPS increased, even if its overall damage per lock-on is kept. You could even double the cooldown of the lock-on to make it so that you're not actually getting more damage out over a set period of time. Just makes it easier to actually kill stuff with Cyclones without giving them extra damage. Bringing back, well, I kind of touched on this very lightly, some of the health from the Liberator to the Viking, but more importantly, also making the Cyclone with that anti-air buff buildable only from Techlabs, because obviously it would be a lot harder to defend against Cyclones with things like Warp Prisms or your Mothership Core or Fast Oracle or Defensive Void Ray if these bad boys were shooting out ridiculous amounts of damage and being reactored, whilst also being able to destroy Stalkers and Pylons on the ground. So make Cyclones a little bit harder to build, but improve their utility while reducing the strength of the Widow Mine. This isn't a very good TLDR so far, is it? Next thing would be either reducing the damage of the auto turret back to 16 or 18 or 19, whatever. Blue flame it, right? Set it to 19 like blue flame so workers aren't getting 2-shot. And at the same time, while you're at it, cut the health down from the auto turret to 100, right? Or reduce the armor to 0. Or cut the range back from 6 to 5 or 4, whatever. You know, if it's a harass thing, that's fine. Does a harass unit need 6 range? You know, magical question. Mutas and Oracles have almost no range, right? Whatever. So these are just some of the thoughts and ideas that I've had on StarCraft so far. I think that there are some cool things that we don't really get to see. A lot of the awesome moments in StarCraft that don't really get to happen because, you know, you run into scenarios where the ability to kill units with a single volley or whatever can make things difficult, right? So I think having a little bit less spammability of some things and making certain engagements and interactions less, how do I say, like doomsday type thing is a big deal. And to top it off, I think that increasing the siege tank's capacity to 8 would be huge. It would really help with Doom drops. You would need to commit a lot more medivacs, and it also means that it'd be easier to scout. They're going to take up more space, and you will be, you know, all in when you go for a big drop like that, which is, you know, there are a lot of different ways that you can look at it, but I think of that as an easy solution that helps to fix TVT. Another thing that Blizzard's already talked about that they're going to be putting into the game, I think, is the Reaper, the KD8 Charge. I don't agree that doubling the cooldown is the best way to fix the Reaper. However, I guess it's a way to fix the Reaper. If anybody from Blizzard is watching this, I really do think the best way to do it would be to remove the KD8 Charge and give it a better version of the KD8 Charge in the mid game that requires either an armory or a Techlab research. The only thing that you shouldn't do is make it so terrible that it's just never researched ever again. But maybe nobody cares if Reapers are ever used past the first 5 minutes. Terran has a lot of unit variety. I don't really care. I think the extremely polarizing frustration of trying to deal with a unit that moves fast, has health regeneration, can go up and down cliffs, has, you know, an attack, and has the ability to do an AoE knockback plus stun all at the same time while stacking. I don't even remember everything I just said because there was a lot of stuff about the Reaper. I don't think that's fair. So I prefer to have the KD8 Charge moved personally, but there have been some cool moments with it used to defend all-ins and stuff, so maybe it's worth keeping for esports. I don't think any of the stuff I've talked about here too much has severe balance implications. I would like to clarify again, balance is not my goal. I would like to see variety pushed for in StarCraft 2. I like seeing interesting things, and I like seeing different ways of being able to handle stuff. I wanted to talk about the carrier and the corruptor a little bit, but it seems like Blizzard is pretty set on going through with the change to buff the speed and the acceleration and the damage point of the corruptor, which might be an effective way to deal with the carrier. I'm not 100% sure that it is, but maybe if this unit is going to have some of the craziest DPS and ability to mess with the AI in the game, then instead of messing with the interceptor cost or the damage or the build time, maybe there's other ways to tweak it, like maybe make the carrier just have more supply. So if 8 carriers are amazing, then that's it. You're getting 8 carriers rather than 10 or 12, whatever. But I don't feel super strongly about it either way, since, you know, we've seen some people dance around it, but we also haven't, at least I haven't seen it too much at the very tip-top level. So, except for my boy Pilly Pilly. Shout out to Pilly Pilly. But, yeah, those are just my thoughts on some of the stuff in StarCraft. I would really like to see Blizzard take a look at making some more changes to kind of round out the game and fix some of the pain points, you know. I think it's silly that they wanted to nerf the Widowmine single target damage, which currently one-shots every single gateway unit, and AoE kills every single support gateway unit. I think it's silly that we can't find a solution to this without, you know, addressing something else. I don't think that tweaking the Cyclone to, you know, do its damage. If the Cyclone did 160 over 7 seconds instead of 14 seconds, and the cooldown was 8 seconds instead of 4 seconds, then you could basically, you know, you're barely reducing the cooldown a very small amount, or even if you want the cooldown to be 10 seconds to line up with the 14 cut to 7, right, in terms of how long it takes to dole out its damage. But some of these units, I think, are a bit frustrating, and solving some of the pain points of the game definitely means reducing a bit of the early game volatility. I don't have an answer for Widowmine drops, but, you know, I also don't want probes to have more health, right? So this has just been a little video by me, probably dragged on way too long. But I have a lot of strong feelings about the game because I want this game to be the best game that it can be. I do not care about only making changes for balance. If you really only wanted the game to be balanced, it'll never happen. People will always complain. Blizzard spent 2 months talking about making changes to the Widowmine, and, you know, we just saw in the last week Protosses have an extremely, you know, nice resurgence against Terran, and I have no problem with that. I am not saying that Terran isn't strong versus Protoss. I am not saying that Protoss is overpowered. I am simply saying that most people's idea of balance is on relative scale unachievable, and while it's important to try to make the game fair, there are ways to solve other pain points with StarCraft 2 without only making changes to balance. And I think more importantly, as a streamer and a content creator, being super blunt here, changes that are made to solve pain points make the game more fun for people, make the game more enjoyable. The average player that I talk to says they feel better about a loss during an epic battle 10, 15 minutes into a game than they do dying because of a Cyclone rush or, you know, a Doom drop or, you know, a pylon rush. These games aren't as satisfying for people. They turn people away from the game. But that's going to be a whole other video talking about how frustrating this game is. As a streamer, as a content creator, I want StarCraft to be more fun. I don't want people to feel like they're limited in what they can do. And as someone who plays the game a lot, I don't want to play versus the same thing every day. Everybody should have options. Everybody should have 1 or 2 different ways that they can play that, you know, you don't just build 20 Widowmines once you see that the other guy got charge, because that's just silly, right? And then what does the other guy do? Not a whole lot, right? So that's it for me. This wasn't a response to anything. I just wanted to talk about making improvements to the game now that IEM-Katowice is over. And if you guys have other suggestions for ways that you guys could possibly fix pain points in the game without, disrupting the current meta or the balance too much, then feel free to hit me up in the comments below. Tweet at me at Nathanias TV on Twitter, or reply to, I'm sure maybe this will get a Reddit thread or something. And I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say. I'm going to try to be as responsible as I can in making these videos. I've found that a lot of pro gamers really don't want to speak their minds. They don't want to tell people because they're afraid of backlash. I don't care what mean things you have to say about me. I want the game to be as good as possible. I will speak my mind. I will talk about the problems of this game in a fair manner to both myself, to the players of all races, and Blizzard. So please keep me informed if any of you guys have any other slam dunk ideas. The big one here that I took away from somebody else, I saw a bunch of threads about this, the siege tank being 8 cargo. Great solution to doom drops. Great solution. That is something that would be absolutely incredible and would not affect in any significant way any matchup outside of TVT. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys for whatever I make next.